This is Arthia Nixon for Impact Radio, and we have got a treat for you as we kick off the new year. Ms. Clara, today we have the son of Marcus Mosiah Garvey Jr., and as you know, he was a Jamaican political leader, publisher, journalist, entrepreneur, an orator who was prominent in the Pan-Africanism movement, and he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, and he also founded the Black Star Line, a shipping and pasture line, which promoted the return of the African diaspora to their ancestral lands. And Marcus Garvey was such an influence on so many persons with his Pan-African philosophy, and he helped inspire a global mass movement and economic empowerment. And in fact, it became so well known that people refer to it as Garveyism. And Garveyism is actually considered one of the roots that inspired the Nation of Islam, right down to the Rastafari movement, which is something that we know is prominent there in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean. But today we're talking to Dr. Julius Garvey, and we're talking to him, and he's in Jamaica right now, and he is working on an incredible project. And we know that nobody else would be able to do these kinds of projects but family members, people who knew people, and people who have access to sources we could not have. And he's also the person behind the www.justiceforgarvey.org, and that's 4 with the number 4. And it's an effort seeking a posthumous pardon by President Obama for his father. Dr. Garvey, thank you so very much for delighting us with your presence today.
Well, it's certainly good to be with you, and I hope I can give some information to your listeners. Right now, I'm standing in National Heroes Park at the site of my father's monument, and we're doing filming. We've been doing filming since this morning. I came down to Jamaica yesterday for the documentary that I'm doing on my dad. It's called A Son, a Vision of Marcus Garvey. And we're documenting, where he lived, where we lived, and so on in Jamaica. People that knew him, or people that were influenced by the movement, etc. And the documentary will take place not just in Jamaica, but clearly in the United States, in England, and Canada, probably Toronto and Halifax, as well as in Africa, certainly Ghana and Ethiopia is at least 2 places, but we may end up also in South Africa and Namibia. So it's an extensive documentary that will be chronicling his life and his work, because I think people don't really have the appropriate knowledge of my father and what it was that he tried to do, and the circumstances, under which this was being done. Basically, it was, after 400 years of slavery and 50 years of colonialism that had ravaged African people and African culture. And he understood this, he saw this, and it was his dream and his vision to really reconstruct African civilization so that we as a people could take our place in history again. Our historical imperative, so to speak, had been destroyed and derailed by Arab conquest and by European conquest significantly. And therefore our civilization was distorted and destroyed. Many of us were in the diaspora as slaves kidnapped from Africa. And having fought for freedom from the physical shackles of slavery, we now had to reconstruct what we considered freedom, what we considered democracy, what we considered the type of society that we had in Africa and that we wanted to see in an industrial and a post-industrial phase. So his organization was set up to do that. That was his vision. Basically, it was a government in exile, but we needed to have a base in Africa. His idea was not to transport people back to Africa per se, but his idea was to link all African people together. Those of us in the diaspora, the Americas, North, Central, and South America, as well as the Caribbean, with the motherland, and to trade between those entities, a different form of triangular trade, where resources, etc., would be coming from the continent. They could be manufactured in factories, etc., India, Marcus, where we had learned our industrial skills, and therefore we then produced commodities, for each other and trade. And the Black Star Line, all of the ships that were bought, etc., the cargo that they carried, was trading between the United States and the Caribbean. It wasn't, again, simply about, taking people to different places. Although clearly a steamship line that will be part of it, you'd carry cargo and you'd also carry people. And we have to understand that that was the means of communication between people at that time, because we didn't have airplanes, and we didn't have all of the internet, etc.
Of course, yes.
And the telephone connections, transatlantic connections. So people communicated, by mail, which went by boat, etc., and moving people and goods from place to place. So the Black Star Line was a signature economic effort as a foundation, economic foundation, on which everything else would be built. So it was important from that perspective. This is the story that I'm trying to tell, and as you mentioned, the other aspect of what we're trying to do is to gain a posthumous presidential pardon from President Obama during his last week in office, because it's of some significance that he was criminalized by J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI in the United States in order to destroy both him and the movement.
Absolutely.
And they were successful to some degree in reducing the momentum of the movement, which at some point had gained as many as 6 million adherents throughout the world. But then he continued his work here in Jamaica and then subsequently in England. So he was never defeated per se, but he was hemmed in by colonial powers as well as by the FBI, who did not want, as J. Edgar Hoover said, a black liberator to quote, stir up the people. And what J. Edgar Hoover meant was that he didn't really want complete freedom and citizenship for African people in the United States. And that's what my father stood for.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
the trial
obviously,
was, very bogus. There was no evidence, and there was all sorts of collusion, etc. And we've documented that by different law firms and so on. So
Right.
all of that evidence is present with the pardon attorney and on President Obama's desk. So we're hoping that he will use his executive privilege to grant his posthumous pardon.
Now, Dr. Julius, and I'll refer to you as Dr. Julius as opposed to Garvey, so we could separate the both of you. But obviously, you hear the passion in your voice. You hear, not just a son preserving his father's legacy, but a man preserving an entire movement. Why was it so important for you to physically go to all of these various sites and countries to document it?
Well, basically, my father laid the foundation for the reconstruction of African civilization. We don't have that built upon to any significant degree. He passed on the vision to people like Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta, and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and they did what they could. But again, they were also circumvented by the CIA, by colonial government. As you know, both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were killed. Kwame Nkrumah, there was a coup that was arranged by the CIA against him, so that his vision of Pan-Africanism, which was built on my father's vision, he was a disciple of my father, that was destroyed. He was moving towards the United States of Africa, which is of extreme importance to have a United States of Africa as a single geopolitical unit that can stand up to Europe, can stand up to the United States, can stand up to China and India on the same level playing field, instead of having 53 or 54 individual small states that can be pushed and pulled by any, big conglomerate, whether it's corporate conglomerate or a conglomerate of governments, that are powerful. So the vision has still not been able to be carried forward to its, you might say, its logical conclusion of having us being in charge of our own resources in our own vine and fig tree, which is the motherland, and then the motherland embracing diaspora in terms of contributing to the motherland, and the motherland in turn protecting us and going forward in unity around the ideas that we brought into the world, because we're the first civilized people. And I think that what has happened and the way in which the world is going is not in a civilized fashion, because people have been destroyed, cultures have been destroyed, species have been destroyed, both plant species, animal species, and the world is being roasted with climate change by an ideology which is materialistic and which does not really care about the environment or the people in the environment, and is totally consumed by making money. And also it's an elitist type of system that, caters to the top 1% or top 5% or 0.1%, however you want to look at it. And then everybody else can sort of, fight among themselves for whatever is left over. And we can see the tremendous inequality all over the world. The world cannot sustain this. That's why we have wars and wars and wars and terrorism and terrorism and terrorism, because people aren't satisfied with the societies that we have. So they're still waiting for a society where people can live out their lives in safety and in terms of their own development and fulfillment as human beings. And I think the basis for that is African humanism. When you look at African societies, they've always been based around the human, not around the material environment, but how the human being interacts with the environment for the benefit of both, because it's a symbiosis. You can't destroy your environment or not know that it is hurting you, because you come out of the environment and you live with the environment. So African humanism is the answer, and this was, my father was definitely in the mainstream of African humanism.
And now, where are you going to debut the documentary once it is completed?
Oh, it's going to take a while. It's going to take at least a year in terms of filming and so on, because it's very arduous, and to get the appropriate interviews and to get the different locations, etc. So, this is the beginning of it. It's been like 2 weeks in production so far. Oh, okay. And then we go back to the United States and we do further interviews and locations there. So it will be a minimum of a year, and that's being optimistic, because it has to be extensive to show the extent of what was developed.
Right. And my question for you is, how could you possibly condense such a lifetime's worth of work and beyond into 2 hours? Was there ever a consideration to perhaps do a mini-series or something that could take a longer period of time?
Well, that's a very good thought. And, we will have the material to be able to do something like that as it is necessary. And as we involve the public and the public response, because obviously something like this requires financing and so on and so forth. So we're in the middle of that. And, we're seeing our way clear in terms of the basis of the documentary, but we'll have so much material that, yes, it could be also done as a miniseries.
Okay. Now, may I ask, as a child growing up, I wouldn't say in the shadow of your father, because definitely, you've paved your own way in so many different aspects. But growing up with this man who is a giant of a man as your father, what were the expectations that you were given?
Well, I don't know that I can look at it that way. The expectation of me was basically to be the best person that I could be. It was not a matter of rivalry or trying to walk in my father's footsteps, but just to be the best human being that I could be, because he was the best that he could be. So it was all about being the best and giving your all to whatever project it is that you're involved with. But it wasn't about necessarily trying to repeat, quotes what my father did, etc.
If there's one personal lesson that you could share, or something that he told you as a child, would you kindly share that with us?
No, there really no such thing that, because the last time I saw my father was in England. I was 5 years old, and that would have been 1938 when we came back to Jamaica. And he died, 2 years later, basically in 1940. So my memories of him are very childlike memories as such. He did write a poem that he dedicated to me, and it's basically along those lines that I just mentioned about being the best that I can be, irrespective of circumstances and obstacles, etc. But all my memories are childhood memories in that sense of playing with my dad and going to the movies and so on and so forth, but not discussions on ideology, etc.
Yes. Now, if there is one thing that you would want viewers of this documentary to take away with them, what would that be?
Well, I don't want them to take one thing away. I want them to try to see the panoramic vision of the man and what he was trying to do and what is still necessary in that sense. In a more direct answer, I want people to understand that the world is not the way it is today, by some sort of divine intervention. It's the mind of man that has created what we see. And the mind of man can create something entirely different from what we see. This is not God-given, and it's not meant to last very well. And if you understand history, there are empires and empires and empires, and they rise and they fall. There's been no set, paradigm that has lasted forever since, Homo sapiens 200,000 years ago started in Africa, so that we can do what we think is necessary and create a society that mirrors our beliefs and our expectations at this point in time. And, there will be obstacles because the status quo, very much is a status quo that wants to remain a status quo. But it is not permanent, and it cannot be permanent because that's not the nature of the world. The world changes. Every day the world changes. And therefore we have to move in that direction of changing the world in which we live, because the systems that have been developed have marginalized us as a people and as human beings in terms of us being able to express the fullness of ourselves and utilize our own resources for our own benefit. So change has to happen, and we need to move in that direction, and hopefully people will see that Marcus Garvey was definitely a change agent. And they'll get on the bandwagon, so to speak.
Very well said, Dr. Julius. Very well said indeed. And we see there's so many websites and all the rest of that popping up all over the place. If we want some of the authentic, from the family, accurate sites and places to find out history on Marcus Garvey, where can we go to find that? I know you have the www.justice4Garvey.org.
Right.
But where are some of the other places that we can look to get some of your works and all the rest of that?
Well, I haven't really written anything for publication. People have been talking to me about that. But basically, the Liberty Hall in Kingston, Jamaica, you can look up Liberty Hall at 76 King Street, Kingston, Jamaica. They have a multimedia museum and center with all the documented history of Marcus Garvey, and it's a great site. Either they can look it up, on the internet, or they can come and visit Jamaica and see for themselves. It's a marvelous exhibit. And Donna McFarlane and Rupert Lewis have put this together, and it's really noteworthy.
Yeah, and coming from Caribbean background myself, definitely, that is something we need to do. Yes, we need to get people to come back home and to see these monuments and to see all of these different things and to see what, a culture where people who are considered the minority in other places are in fact the majority in many other places, right down to, Jamaica having a lady who's of color who is was the prime minister. So, there's so much definitely that could be taught coming from out of the Caribbean. And I do thank you so very much for speaking to me so candidly. And again, that website is www.justiceforgarvey.org. And we thank Dr. Julius Garvey for speaking with us today on Impact. And we wish him all the success in bringing this project to fruition. Thank you again, Dr. Garvey.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
Much for having me.
Okay.
Much for